Jong, the saddest king in Korean history. In Korean history, thinking of a king who had the most tragic story, the majority of Koreans will recall the story of Jong. Jong ascended to the throne at the age of 11, and he is known to have committed suicide forcibly. Jong was the sixth king of the Joseon dynasty, and his name was Lee Hong-wi. He was the only son of Moon Jong, who was the fifth king of Joseon, and his mother was Hyun Duk-wang-hu. Jong was born in 1441, and he died in 1457. He was on the throne between 1452 and 1455. As he was the grandson of Jong and the only son of Moon Jong, he did not have any faults to be a king. However, because his father, Moon Jong, had been physically infirm since he was young, just 2 years after his coronation, he died of a tumor on his back. Hence, Jong became the king in 1452. As his son was young, before Moon Jong died, he asked Hwang Bo-in and Kim Jong-seo to take care of Jong, and he also asked Sun Sam-moon, Park Peng-yeon, and Shin Suk-ju to help his young son, Jong. Although Moon Jong died, and Jong rose to the throne, Hwang Bo-in, who was the Yeon-yu-jong, and Kim Jong-seo, who was the Jar-yu-jong, were influential in the Joseon government, so they conflicted against Seon-dae-gun, who was the second son of Jong. In fact, Seon-dae-gun was the person with political ambition for royal power, so finally, in October in 1453, Seon-dae-gun rose in revolt for power against Kim Jong-seo and Hwang Bo-in, and Kim Jong-seo and Hwang Bo-in were murdered. That power struggle is called Kyu-jong-nan. After Kyu-jong-nan, Seon-dae-gun seized power, and even Kim Sun-dae-gun, who politically had supported Jong, was banished, so eventually, Jong coercively handed over power to Seon-dae-gun, and with losing every political power, he became the Sangwang. In 1455, Seon-dae-gun became the seventh king of Joseon, and he was Sejong. However, Jong's ordeal never ended. Sayuk-shin, Sun Sam-moon, Park Peng-yeon, Hoi-ji, Lee Kae, and Yu Sung-won, and Yu Yun-bu plotted to assassinate Sejong in a feast to greet the envoys from Myeon-na-ra, which was to be held in June in 1456. Nevertheless, this plot failed because of the betrayal of Kim Jil and Jong Chang-sun, and about 70 people involved in this plot were cruelly executed. As a consequence, Jibhyun-jeon was abolished, and Jong was relegated to Nosan-gun and exiled in Yeongwol, in Gangwon-do. Subsequently, Kim Sun-dae-gun, who was the uncle of Jong and younger brother of Sejong, recruited soldiers in an attempt to dethrone Sejong and restore the reign of Jong, but this plot was also detected, and Kim Sun-dae-gun was executed. The subjects of Sejong strongly insisted that the rebellions which had happened against Sejong were fundamentally attributable to Jong, so Sejong ordered Kim Bu-dosa to take poison to Jong in order to kill him. When Kim Bu-dosa arrived at Yeongwol, Jong had already killed himself, and it was the tragic event which occurred in October in 1457. The young boy who became the king at 11 years old died at 16 years old, and his life still demonstrates how cool-hearted the power is. About 200 years later, in the reign of Suk-jong, who was the 19th king of Joseon, the status of Jong as the king became restored.